All right, so this is where we left off last time. I showed assigning the labels to this and then basic colors. That's as far as we went with it. The next stage we have to do is actually the animation portion that we're going to be bringing into KeyShot. Now, part of this will be done inside of Cinema. The other part will be done inside KeyShot because I want you to see animation on both sides, okay? KeyShot animation is very limited. It's basically like drag and drop kind of stuff with some values, so it's not very freeing, right? So something like the drone moving up, I want to have a little bit more freedom in how I move it up, but something like the propellers is not a whole lot of freedom that I need there because the propellers are basically just going to spin, okay? So the first thing I need to do anytime I animate anything is I need to basically organize it so that it's ready for animation. Just like that robot arm that I showed you, in order for me to bend the arm like this, I have to make sure that all of the pieces there are all joined correctly, okay? Because if the fingers are not in the right spot, as the arm moves up, the fingers will just stay there, or they'll go further than they need to go, okay? So looking at this drone body, before you even go further into the lecture, you can hit pause just to think about it yourself, but think about literally how this thing moves. Like, what are the moving parts of this, okay? Now, on this one, my moving parts are going to be the propellers and the little caps right here. So these little cyan things will rotate, and that will rotate the propellers, right? Inside, I'm sure there's some mechanical things moving, but we don't see it. We didn't build it, so we're going to ignore that, okay? So as far as the outside goes, those little cyan things with the blue, these things, those will move. And then for the rest of it, the whole body is basically going to move together, right? The propellers don't move separate than the body. So I need to make sure that my propellers are all grouped together, which I did before. I already have that set up. I'm going to test my rotation of this. Okay, so it looks like it's rotating correctly. I can verify it by going into the top view. And this is something you definitely want to do before you go any further. If your propellers aren't set up correctly, literally, this is how the propeller should spin, like around a center point, right? It might spin like this. Whoa. Like that. It might spin in this crazy thing where that's not how it's supposed to spin. So you have to make sure that your pivot points and everything in the right spot. So as I rotate this, it's spinning perfectly around that center point. If it doesn't, I will hit L. That's my center point movement tool. And then I will adjust where this center point is. Okay, now just so you can see what it looks like when it doesn't work correctly, here's an exaggeration. It might rotate like this, which is obviously not correct. Now that's, again, it's obvious that it's not moving correct, but it might also move like this. And this is also not correct. Okay, now it might be hard for you to see that this is not moving correctly, but if you look at the pink part, which is the little base part, you'll see that that's actually moving off, like it's not perfectly rounded. Yeah, it's like warbling or whatever, yeah. So make sure your pivots are in the exact spot. You may have to zoom crazy far in here and make sure that it's lined up to that center line here and the center line there. Now, as I'm rotating this around, I don't know if you caught it already, but I'm actually grabbing the entire thing, which is the housing too. The housing does not move. It's literally just the cyan part and just this blue part. So I need to make sure that I go into this animation prop area, and that's the part that I should be, rotating around. And yep, that definitely looks like it's good. And again, I will verify it in the top view. And yep, that is definitely working correctly. Now you want to check each one of yours. I already know that each one of mine are correct, so I'm good. Oops. There you go. Cool. So all of my propellers are good. So now I'm going to go and grab all of my items, and then I'm just going to Alt-G to put them into a group. In order for everything to move together, everything has to be in their own group, into one group. And then I will call this drone full. Okay. Now what I have to look at is how the drone is actually going to move, okay? So some stuff to consider. If I am a person and I'm standing somewhere and I start to walk, what is the first part of my body that is going to move? My hip, right? So my hip would be the first part that will move. Now, the hip is like the center of your body, so everything you do is centered from the hip, okay? On this drone, we have to also consider how this would move. So as this comes up, the propellers are spinning, and this thing is going to start shifting up. The pivot point for the entire drone body is kind of reliant on where that center point is of how it's going to move around. So I like to put the center point of this basically like in the center of the body here, okay? So I'm going to move my pivot, so I hit L, and I'm just going to shift this down a bit. It looks like it was already about in a good spot, but I'm just going to put it about there. Yep, that's good. Okay? So now what's going to happen is my drone, in this case, what we're going to do is we're going to animate it pretending that it's sitting on the ground. For 2 seconds, it's going to start the blade spinning, and then for 2 seconds, it'll lift up off the ground, okay? So if this is 30 frames a second, how many frames am I going to need for it to just sit on the ground? 60, right? Okay, so I'm going to set this to 120. 120 will give me 4 seconds. So the first 60 of this, the drone will be sitting on the ground, and then the last 60, it'll be lifting off, okay? We're not animating a camera moving around because KeyShot sucks at animating cameras moving around. So our camera is going to be a still shot or a still camera basically with the drone kind of moving. So we don't want to have too much movement here. So we're going to imagine the drone is right here. I'm going to go to frame 60. And it doesn't have to be right at 60. You can be at 55. You can be at 62. That's fine. Just roughly around that region, okay? What people do is that they start the drone moving up the same time the propellers are spinning, and that doesn't work. If you've ever seen a drone, they have to spin their propellers enough to lift them off the ground, and that doesn't happen within a frame. So I'm at frame 60. I'm going to grab my drone, and I'm going to set keyframes for all the positions and rotations. Okay? When we animate stuff, doesn't matter if we're doing it in 3D or 2D or whatever, we have a start point, we have an end point, and then we work our way to the middle to figure out what we want that middle to look like. So when I do a walk cycle, I don't put my foot here and then here and then here and then here and then try to get it to make that stomp. What I do is I set the start, I set the end, and then I go into the middle and I raise it up. And then I go into here and I raise it up and tweak what that arc is looking like. So the start of it is there, it's on the ground. I'm going to go to 120, and then I'm going to lift it up as far as I want it to go. Now, we don't have a lot of room, so I'm not going to move it too far. I just basically want to get it off the ground. So I'm going to go, let's say, that far. Okay. Then I'm going to set a keyframe for my positions, and then set a keyframe for my rotations. Okay. So all we have are 2 keyframes. One at 60, it's on the ground. One at 120, it's up in the air. That's all we've done, literally straight up in the air. Now I can go into the middle of this. Actually, I'm going to go, yeah, I'll go into the middle of that. And then I'm just going to give it some rotation and some movement. Because if you've ever seen a drone take off, it's not just like zip, it comes up. Usually it kind of like warbles up a little bit or maybe, shifts to one side. So I'm going to give it a little bit of rotation, not much. I'm going to scoot it over that way a little bit. And then I'm going to reset a new position keyframe and a new rotation keyframe. So now my animation looks like this. It just comes up, and then it does that. Okay? So now I can go into, let's say, 74, which is halfway between those two, and maybe give this a little bit more rotation that way, and maybe move it up a little bit this way, and maybe a little bit over. It shouldn't be drastic. It shouldn't like shoot over to the left, then shoot over to the right. It should just kind of like wobble upwards. So I set my keyframe again. I'm going to go into the middle of these ones. I'm going to pull it over to that direction, maybe rotate it it that way. Set another keyframe. So now if I rewind this and hit play, what we should get is the drone sits on the ground for 2 seconds, which is what it's doing. The whole 2 seconds, right? And then at 60, it starts to take off. So what I don't want to happen here is I don't want it to look stupid. That's it, right?
Now, one question I do have is in regards to the propellers, when you get and you're setting that last keyframe, so that it keeps going to the same position. Is there something in cinema that similar to After Effects where when you're rotating something at the top of the actual angle that you're trying to rotate it on, it gives you like how many times it can rotate?
Correct.
Is there a way to do that with Cinema 4D when you're setting that final keyframe?
Yep, so you can actually set it so that it would, you could either say, I want to rotate so many, like, let's say 1 time around would be 360 degrees, 2 times would be 720. We could just multiply however many rotations we want, or we can set up 1 and tell it that after this, just keep going. Just in the same direction, just keep going. Now in key shot, which is where we're going to actually do the propeller rotations, that you literally say, rotate around a bajillion times, and it just goes on. And you can stretch it out or shrink that in however far you want that to happen. Okay? So that's as far as I want to go with the animation here, is right there. 2 seconds of animation coming up. You could definitely add more. The more animation, the longer this is, the longer it's going to take to render. Okay? So I'm satisfied with that, so I'm going to save this as, and this will be number 6. And I'll put the word animation in there. Cool. So now I can go into KeyShot, and then I can re-import, or I can import this file. So I'm going to import my animation one. Notice how big I've gotten. Bless you. Because we have all these subdivisions, my file is basically a gig. So this is not going to run incredibly fast moving around, but it'll be good enough. Assign materials from library. Everything should be defaulted to fine, so I'm just going to import. And what I want to do is I want to check to make sure that my animation is still working. If my animation didn't come in for some reason, I need to address that. Maybe I grabbed the wrong file. Maybe I didn't set keyframes. A million things could have happened, right? So before I get any further, once this comes in, I want to hit the play button, which is right down here, and watch that. Now, if any of these don't show up, environments, scene, or this timeline, it's all under window. I believe that's where they've hidden them. Okay, so I would go to window and I would turn on the environments, or the library, sorry, library. I would turn on project, which is on that side, and then I would turn on animation, which is right here. And for whatever reason, cylinder seems to be taking the longest time, which is probably the body, which probably has the most divisions on it. That's a new one? Oh, I ran out of disk space. Holy cow. Yep. I had a whole bunch of stuff removed earlier. I'm surprised that it even did that. Yes. Now, KeyShot is one program that industry is using. It's probably the most popular program it's using for exactly what we're going to be doing, which is rendering stuff out. There's another one which is called VRED. VRED is used by companies like GM and Chrysler. It's made by Autodesk. It does a very similar thing. It does it 10 times better, I think, than VRED. The difference between VRED and KeyShot is that VRED costs about $25,000 and KeyShot costs like $1,000. So more companies are going to KeyShot because of the cost reduction. They could have 25 people using KeyShot versus 1 person using VRED. But this is, incredibly expensive. But it can do a lot of cool stuff too. But And more features. Okay, so like when I was showing the stuff in Nuke, where you have those different passes that would come out, inside Maya, you can actually specify, here's the passes I want to come out. You can make your own passes. You can customize it like incredibly. KeyShot is limited as to what you can pull out of it. Basically, you can get the beauty pass, which is what typically we're used to, just the nice picture. You can have a couple passes in there, but that's about it. In VRED, you can break it down really, really far as to how much stuff you pull out. And then the performance on it is better than KeyShot because it's more high-tech. Some of the software manufacturers, there's a place called Dassault. Dassault does 3D modeling. They do renderings. They do animations. But they also do software development. And it's a local company, but it's worldwide as well. Dassault Systems. They're also French. Yeah, so they do products. So one of our students who graduated a few years ago, he got an internship at Dassault, and one of his first jobs was to go through and organize every single part of a car on a different layer. So when I talked about scripting and how scripting can really help us automate things, that's what he did. He wrote a script that would basically grab all the pieces, you hit this button, and it automatically puts every single item on a different layer. So that's what got him his actual job at the company. One of the things that they did, or they were developing at the time, was they wanted to be able to videotape a car and then in live view be able to click buttons and change features of the car. Okay, so right now if we were, well, rewind to like 2010, okay? In 2010, this stuff wasn't as available as it is now. Wait, what is this? Cool, so it loaded, finally. And I'm sure I ate up a bunch of disk space too doing that. Yeah, whatever, I'll clean that up later. All right, so I brought it in. You'll see down here in my animation that there's nothing happening on drone full until 2 seconds, and then 2 seconds to 4 seconds, there's this yellow bar. This is what's neat about KeyShot's animation. It's basically just this bar. If I want to move that animation, I move the bar. If I want to extend the animation, I extend the bar. If I want to shorten the animation, I shorten that bar. So it has some neat features with it. So first thing I said we want to do is hit play and then test it out. Now it's going to be blocky. Ignore the blockiness. It actually plays back much quicker than it was doing inside the other program. So at any point, if you don't like, you have to reacquaint yourself with the hotkeys. Different hotkeys for every single program that you're ever going to touch. So middle mouse button is just panning. Left mouse button is to do this. And then right, nope. Right and Alt is to zoom in and out. There we go. So look at the animation. Verify that you like the animation. There's no point in going any further if the animation isn't working. Okay? It shoots up too quick, or it goes very fast and then somehow slows down, or it goes doot, 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 and does like some blocky kind of movement. Fix those back in Cinema, re-import back into here. Okay, that's all you have to do. They've simplified this process, which is again another nice reason about KeyShot, is it imports directly the Cinema 4D files. I don't believe VRED does that. I think VRED you have to export it out and then import separate file format. Versus that, yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I don't think this one, I can double check it. I'm pretty sure that Maya doesn't, oh it does, okay. So Maya does go in there, but there's other stuff that you'd have to worry about. Okay, so I like the way this works. Again, before I go any further, I want to then put in my animation for the propellers. The process for this is pretty simple, pretty straightforward once you see the process. So all I have to do is dig through all of my stuff here until I find my animation propellers. So propeller, propeller, propeller. There they are. I'm also seeing that my wire cloner is not showing up. I believe we had that last time too, where my wire cloner didn't show up. Let me click the eyeball on and see if they do show up then. seeing them. All right, so I right-clicked and I did show only that part, and I'm not seeing that part.
You're not seeing anything.
I'm not seeing anything, right?
Waiting for a minion to show up out of nowhere.
So let me jump back to Cinema and see why that's happening. And it's just part of what we do. So there's my wire cloner. Oh, I never hit C on my wire cloners. So this object is still a Cinema 4D object. It's not a piece of geometry. So if I grab the wire cloner itself, actually I'm going to grab all of these pieces. I'm going to hit C on it. Now they're actual pieces of geometry, okay? Now you don't have to worry about the technicality that goes behind it. All we need to know is that when we create a regular object like this inside Cinema and we don't hit the C key, it's a Cinema 4D object, not a piece of geometry that it could read. Now to simplify this setup here, I'm also going to go into this and I'm going to do a connect. Oops. I'm just going to do a connect right at the top of this, I guess, right there. And then I'm going to hit C on that. And what that should do is it should take all of those wires and put them as one item. Okay, so that'll make my Cinema 4D file a little bit smaller because now it's all one item versus the millions of items. So I'm just going to do that to each one of those. So I'm going to open up this one, open up my wire cloner. Or actually, I'll just go here to connect and then say C. And then that should hopefully put everything together or crash Cinema, one of those two.
Now, when you put it into KeyShot, it's still going to recognize that each one of those parts is a different color, correct?
Yep, it'll recognize each color as a separate part. So when we drop materials on it, we can just assign whatever material to the orange, whatever material to the pink, and then cyan and the blue. I also, while this is chugging, let me undo that view only show all parts. I also noticed my, I don't know where this went. Frame, where's frame? View. Visibility, yes. Elevation. Out behind target, blah, blah, blah. No. I don't know where everything went. It was right there. Oh, it doesn't matter. Anyway, okay, so that's on. So now I hit C on there. That gives you one. Okay. My blades were not very smooth. So they came in being chunky like that. You can see it right there. So something else that I noticed, I want to fix that as well. I need my blades to be nice and smooth because it'll look horrible. And it literally is like if you I'm going to hit C on these first because that seemed to go quicker. If you notice anything, fix it because you don't want to go through the whole process of modeling, texturing, rendering, blah, blah, blah. And then you get to that end stage and something, like one little thing makes the rest of it look like crap. You just take the time, make sure it looks good. And what you're going to do is you're going to reinforce all the stuff that we're doing, and it'll go quicker. So even though this process seems like it's taking me a long time, it's really not. And even though it might seem like, okay, well, it's good enough, it's not. You want to make sure your stuff looks as best as it can. So there's my blade cloner. There it is. And I'm going to subdivide this. That looks much better. And then I will hit C on that. And then that's good. Okay. And I'm going to open up my propeller 2. There's my blade cloner. I'm going to add a subdivision to it and then hit C. And then close that. Open up propeller 1. Subdivide that, hit C. Subdivide that, hit C. Good. Okay, so now I can save this again. This may add some more sizing to this. Oh well. We'd rather have a decent looking model than a small file. So if the file ends up being 2 gigs, if that's what it takes for it to look good, then that's what it takes for it to look good. I've dealt with vehicles. Literally, you cannot open the entire vehicle all at once because it would crash your computer because the files are so big. You'd have to open up pieces and then wipe away all the stuff you don't need. So now I can go into KeyShot. Import again after I go to File New. I'm going to File New just to clear off anything that might still be in this one. I do not want to save it. There we go, and then I will import again. Grab that one. Yeah, 1.4 gigs, that's not bad. It's still about the same as it was before. When they did, what was that? 2007, I think G.I. Joe came out, or 2008 G.I. Joe came out, I think it was. There's a scene in it where they have this Eiffel Tower and these nanite green things basically get loose in the city, and they go to the Eiffel Tower, and they're eating away at the Eiffel Tower, and then it collapses. So that model of the Eiffel Tower was actually built the exact same way that the real Eiffel Tower was built, bolt for bolt, screw for screw. So every single bolt, screw, beam, metal piece that's on the actual Eiffel Tower was on that model. And they couldn't, at the time that they did that, they couldn't open up the entire file on one computer. So they actually opened up a quarter of each of it on separate computers, and it was all simulated all separately and then pieced back together in the end, which is like insane. But it is what it is. If they wanted it to look that good, that's what they had to do. All right, so now it loaded. Now I can, again, double check it. I see my wires are loaded there. I see my blades look nice and smooth. So now I can double check again my animation. Not that it didn't work a second ago, but again, you always want to double check. Everything works. Wonderful. Okay, so now I'm ready to do the animation on this. So I'm going to open up my drone here, and I'm going to go and find my propellers. Propeller, 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 propeller. And I'm going to go to, it doesn't matter which one I go to first. The first one that's in the list is sufficient, so I will do that one. So the way that animation works in here is it literally is just a right click. I want to animate, and I want to animate the rotation. Okay? So this is where it kind of sucks because we don't set keyframes. We set basically like this is an animation clip, and then I assign that clip to something, which is kind of weird. So I'm going to animate the rotation. You'll see down here, if that wanted to resize, you would see down there that there's an animation propeller. Why won't you go up? There it goes. I'll just drag it up here so you can see it. There it is. So there's the animation for the propeller. Now if I double click that, again, I'll drag this up too apparently because I didn't want to come with it. You get these properties that I can resize. There we go. And I'm pulling these up just so you can see it. Actually, I'll put them there, I guess, so that makes more sense. There we go. There it is. Okay. So now all I have to do is I'm going to take the, how many degrees do I want this to rotate? So from the start of this animation, how many degrees do I want it to rotate? Right now it's set to 90, which is basically like a quarter of a turn. Don't be shy with this number. A drone has to spin around like a bajillion times in order for that propeller to spin enough to get it off the ground. So if I said that I would typically put in 9,000, that's probably about an accurate number. I probably would even go higher than that, maybe to like 12,000, and that is a sufficient number. You can verify it by hitting play and seeing. Now, this propeller is only set to animate for 1 second, and then it stops. In order to extend that, I drag this bar to 4 seconds. And now it's going to go all 4 seconds, which is how long it should spin, because as it lifts off, the propeller is still spinning. So now I hit play, and there it goes. Okay, so does that look good? No. Good is not the word, right? So it doesn't know which direction to spin. It's spinning it like this way versus the correct way. So then we just pick the direction. Most likely it's going to be Y unless you really screwed up your model. So I will hit Y, and then I'll hit the play button, and then we will verify, yep, that looks good. Okay. Now, this is actually spinning backwards. If you look how it's spinning, the blade is like on an angle, right? So as it spins this way, as the pointy part or the angled part goes this way, it would actually be pushing it down. It doesn't matter. You can ignore it for yours. I can't ignore it for mine, though.
So are you just going to put a negative in front of the degree?
Exactly. That's all we have to do. So I'm going to go to the negative 12,000, and that is sufficient. Now, there will be a spot on your degrees that is not a good number regardless of how high you go, right? So just as a for instance, let's say that I have an item here. I guess this is good enough. Let's say I rotated this 90 degrees over one frame. So it's going to look like that, right? So if I go from frame 1 to frame 2, imagine that there is no pictures on this box. This is a completely solid box. You would not see any movement on this at all, right? So I have to make sure that my number makes it look at least like it's moving. You'll see it when you hit play if it's moving, okay? There's also going to be a for instance, where you might rotate it 89 degrees, right? So this is 0 degrees, this is 90. So if I rotated it 89 degrees, it would actually look like every frame that it's going backwards, okay? Again, nothing you have to be too concerned about. Just when you hit play, make sure it looks like it's spinning, okay? And if it's not, change the number to something different. There's 30 frames in a second. This is 4. So again, we don't have to do this, but I just want you to kind of see it so you can see it. 30 times 4 is 120 times 360. 43,000, that's like a ridiculous amount. Let's divide that by 4. 10,800, okay. So if I went to 10,800 here, and then I hit play, you're seeing this kind of weird thing happen where it looks like it's like stopping and then moving and stopping and moving. It's just, that's a weird number for it. If I change it to something just not 10,800, it would work, okay? Or it would look hopefully better. 12,000 for me just happened to be that magic number. So that seems good. All right. So now, this is, again, one of the awesome things about how they do have this set up is once we have the animation set up on one of these items, somehow I'm off screen here. Hold on, let me drag this back in. Let me not drag it back in because it doesn't want me to do that, apparently. As far as interfaces go, this is one of the annoying things about this software is just how it lays its stuff out. Like, there it goes. Okay, so now everything's back in. Let me drag this back in here. There it goes. All right. So once I have an animation set up, I can right-click and copy the animation, and then I just have to go into the next one, and then I can right-click animation and then paste the animation. Okay, so now the animation's on the other one. So then I go to the next one, animation, paste the animation. Go to the next one, animation, paste. Okay, so now if I were to hit play again, whoops, I rewind it first. You'll see they all spin and then they all go up. If you remember when we modeled this, what did we do with every other propeller? We flipped them, right? Because in order for them to go correctly, they would be opposite, right? So I know that my first one up here, which is propeller 3, there he is, right there. That one is going the correct direction. So this one and that one should go the opposite direction. So if I just click on it, I can see, okay, that's that one there. So I go to the rotation, and then I take off that negative. And then I go down to the next one here. That's that one. That one's good. So this one's got to be the other one. Take off the negative. And then I hit play, and then, oops, that's rewinding. I hit play, and now that's good. Okay, now it will look like crap like it's doing right now. As you're hitting play, ignore the crappiness. All right, animation's done. That's it. It spins the propellers, it comes off, that's all. So I can close these and get back to my regular window. I should probably save this also because I've done so much work on it. Sarcona, drone, this is not fall though, is it? It is P drive, winter 2510, drone. I'm gonna put this in my scenes folder and call this drone keyshot. When you turn your stuff in, do not give me your keyshot file. I don't need that, okay?
You know, when we were sitting here back in January and we started the semester, we were all in the mind state by, you know, we'd be getting here probably with about 4 or 5 weeks in class, and then it would finally start feeling like whatever, it wouldn't end like it started.
Right?
I really started thinking this semester is going to end just how it started.
Right. Well, in a sucky kind of way, it's good. If you've ever been in this room in April before they turn the air conditioning on, and when it is 70 or 80 out there, it's like 100 degrees in here. Because of the computers, because of the confined room, it gets super hot and sweaty, and I'm basically wearing a tank top. So it's, in some way it's good. May, yes, we should definitely see some heat. They'll turn the air on, hopefully. All right, animation's good. Now we can play with our environment. You're gonna do two things. One of them is gonna be a studio shot. That's a studio shot there. You're gonna do a still image in a studio, up close, just like that. The other one is gonna be an animation, not in a studio, okay? So that's where you're gonna go to either the interiors or the outdoors, either one of these environments in the environment tab, and you'll drop one of these in here. That's literally how simple this is. And then you'll just kind of line it up. This one looks stupid. Why would he be in a toy store or whatever this is? He wouldn't be in a bathroom either, but let's see what else we got. Industrial kitchen, no. There's some weird ones. Office hallway.
That might work.
That one might work, yeah. I'll go with the office hallway. It's not the best one. I think, I like that one the best. All right, so I'll go with this one. All right. So it looks like he's floating too. Like I don't see any contact shadows. There might be some, it's just hard to see. No, I guess there is, yeah, it's just hard to see. So I'm gonna kind of line him up. If I'm not sure if he is lined up or in the right spot, I can click on the model here, go to position, and then make sure that he is snapped to the ground, okay? And that will literally make sure he's snapped to the ground if for some reason he's kind of floating or whatever. You could also adjust his position if you need to as well. You can adjust the scale. Typically those are fine. I'm gonna go to the environment, and I'm just going to change the size of the environment to maybe something a bit bigger. So this is 15780, so I'm gonna make it 25,000. It's getting kind of grainy, so maybe I'm gonna go the other way. 10,000. 5,000. All right, 5,000 looks good. Looks like a huge drone in there, but that'll work. All right. You could also rotate the environment around. So if you needed to, you don't want to rotate the drone, let's say, because your logo is in a specific spot, you want to rotate the environment, definitely do that. I'm going to keep him kind of in a shaded area here. And I'm going to get him basically positioned for where he's going to be taking off from. So I think that's probably good. I do want to bring up my animation and hit play just to make sure that he doesn't go too far out of frame. Nope, I think that's good there. If he goes out of frame right at the end, that's fine. Or you can have the drone fly into you right at the end. That's cool too. But I just want to basically get some sort of framing for this as far as where things are going to be located. Let me zoom out just a bit. You can also use a scroll wheel to zoom out as well. All right. So I'll adjust that and tweak that after. Okay, that's good enough for now. All right, so there's where he's going to start. I'm going to start dropping in my textures now. So I'm going to go to my materials. And I know this is where my camera is going to be, so I can actually zoom in a bit just to get a bit more closer to that. So there's architectural ones, concrete, regular surfaces, and then like windows. Basically, you can just kind of pick through these and see, what looks good. I've never played with these Axalta ones. I think that's new with version 7.
Yeah, Axalta, those with the high hues colors, that's the company I was talking about.
Yeah, that's using them.
Yeah, we've got a contract with them.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, those are cool. Yeah, they look like they're clear coats too, so.
Yep, those are based off of their automotive colors. They've all got a candy apple finish going with the metallics.
Yeah, look at that. And then what's cool about this, you can see it's even picking up like the reflections of the environment. So that's cool. I like that. That blue is neat on there. What else can we put? Let's go with yellow maybe on these. No, that looks ugly. Let's go with a different blue. I think I'm going to go with that different blue, and then I'm just going to change the color myself. So all of these have a material tab. You click on the material that's blue by you, I guess, or you can click on the item. There you go. And then you can change the properties of it. So there's no thing there. There's just this. There's also material graph. Color tweaker. Oh, that's neat. All right, I don't want to get too involved into that. I think we just keep it simple.
No, you'll have too much fun.
Yeah. I am going to leave it that blue. I think that might be kind of neat. I should have put some stripes on it. Maybe I'll go back and do that. I'm going to go with some metals. Let's go with aluminum, and I'll put some aluminum out here. That looks neat. That stripe that I have here, I'm going to give that one of these.
I'd recommend the red would look kind of good.
Like that?
Yeah.
Yep, that looks cool.
Their red's really good.
And then I should have a copper that I can use on these wires. So I'm going to do a rough copper right on those wires. Yep. Yeah, I don't like that aluminum. The aluminum copper seemed like they're too much. Maybe I'm going to go to a iron.
What about the green?
Oh yeah, the green, I got that too.
Got all of this cool finish, and then those green just stick out like a sore thumb.
Yeah, well, it's picking up some of the environment here. That's why it's coloring it that. So I guess that's just going to be the way that is. All right. Let's go back to our Exalta, and I'll do the same red, I think, on top of that. I have the same material in here, so it says, do you want to link them? I'm going to hit yes. That way they're the same material. And then I have these purple stands. Again, I'll find something kind of neat there. Maybe I'll do this black in the stands. How would that look? Yeah, that's neat. Cool. All right, so now all my labels are not on here, so I need to get my labels onto here. So I'm going to double click this. This will bring up the material for that one. And if I go to textures, oops, for this one it looks like there's only two textures. There's a bump and an opacity. Let me go to texture map. And this is a bit experimental too because I don't know what I'm expecting here. Nope, that's not it. Okay, so let me go to labels, and then I'll load in a label this way. Add a label texture. And then it drops it onto the diffuse. You'll see that the color basically went to this white color again, which I'll fix in a second. I'm going to change how it's loading it up based on the mapping type. I'm going to change this to UV. And what it should do is read the UVs from Cinema and put the labels where we had them originally. So I believe I had, yep, there it is. Nope, maybe that's not it. Let me see where I had it. Yeah, I had the SS right there. And that's on, whoops. Is that the battery pack side? Well, anyway, it should have the SS on there, but it's not loading that up. There's also another spot down here. I think I have to turn sync off and two-sided off. These shiny ones are not working the same way the other ones did, so I will not have a hot hue on there. I'll have to play with that. I'm just going to go to the regular paint then, go to regular, actually I'll just go to plastic, because I know that should work. I'll just drop this on here, and then I'll load that texture in as my color. Yes, yes, I know. And then I will set this to UV. then I should have to turn off. No, why aren't you coming in correctly? Two-sided. Shouldn't matter. Sync shouldn't matter. Oh, there it goes. No, that should definitely be working. Position texture. I wonder if it's not reading in the targa. That's what it looks like. All right, let me go to Photoshop and just resave it. Occasionally, going from Photoshop into any other program, targas are typically acceptable. Sometimes it doesn't read them for whatever reason. So I'll save it as a TIFF. I'll try that, and I'll save it as a JPEG and try that. It should work with the targa, but it doesn't want to read anything. What? No. You full-size the window, and it locks that scene to this proportion, okay? So under my image here, I have this set to 960 by 540. This came over from, I'm assuming it came over from Cinema, because I don't remember setting that. Did I set that here? No. I don't know where it got this number. Usually that number is not there. Usually it's some crazy number, okay? Regardless, let's pretend that I had a different number set in here. So I'm going to unlock this, and then, there we go. So I double click, and you'll see that it fills this screen, and now it has this ridiculous resolution here, 983 by 685, okay? So if I type 960 by 540, this version seems to have corrected that. If it didn't, maybe you have a different version on your computer, you downloaded one, whatever, you run into it. If I start changing those numbers and it's not updating, you have to free your window size, then type in those numbers, then hit the lock, and then make this bigger, okay? And then your proportions will be locked to that resolution. It doesn't always do that. Apparently, the version 7, whichever version I'm on, 7 point whatever, it's good. Previous versions, it wasn't, and you'd have to do that little trick, okay? So make sure that our resolution is 960 by 540. This window here, that's what's going to render. I'm going to double check my animation again and verify that, yes, I see it for a majority of that. If it goes out right at the end, like I said, I'm not too concerned with that. I may just kind of rotate it down a little bit just so I can see more of it as it comes, or maybe I'll zoom out a bit. Oops, don't adjust that. There we go. So that's better. Okay. So I'll close this, close that. All right, so that's good. I'm going to go to my render settings here and go to render. This is what brings up the render settings for your item, okay? So in here, we're not doing a still in this case, we're doing an animation first. My width will be 960, my height will be 540. Make sure those are typed in. I may need to, adjust it, whatever. We're doing the entire duration, which should be the 120 frames because we set that up in our animation. We are not doing a video output because we want to bring this into After Effects. So we're doing a frames output, so it'll be Sarcona _ drone keyshot. It's going to put it into whatever folder I specify. So this will go into our renders. We want these to be TIFFs. Perfect. Here's those render passes. So in previous versions of Keyshot, there were literally only like 3 or 4 of these that you could actually do. It was basically a clown pass, which is just basically like what we rendered out here. Like this is considered a clown pass. If I went into After Effects and I needed to change the color of just these, I can color sample just the blades and change the color on just those items. So one of the passes you could export out is a clown pass, which will export out basically just what we see there. And then we could adjust coloration after. There's also a depth pass, so if we wanted to add depth of field to our stuff, so you remember from our environment, we had a depth of field button. We set some stuff up and we could see that depth of field. You could actually do that in post which is more efficient. So you could render that out as well. Shadow, here's ambient occlusion, so we could render that out as well. Just for fun, I'm going to hit ambient occlusion, I'm going to hit depth, and I'll hit clown. You do not have to do those. I'm going to do those so you can see. I will just show it whenever this finishes rendering, next class, class after, what that would look like. There's also lighting, so if I needed to adjust lighting after, I could do that. I think that's plenty of information. I'm also going to render these as, you can leave yours as TIFF. I'm going to leave mine as an EXR. An EXR will basically, instead of rendering out a beauty pass, which is what we typically see, the pretty one, it'll render out a beauty pass, ambient occlusion, clown pass, depth pass, 4 individual renderings I'll get out of this as a TIFF. If I set it to EXR, what it should do is put all those into one file. So basically I'll have one file that has all this stuff loaded into it. Okay, so that should be good. You leave yours as TIFF, you don't need these, you do need the frames, you don't need video, 960 by 540. For our options here, we would leave this at 128, that's typically a good number. And I'm going to close this, I don't want to render it yet, okay? Under image, under lighting, there is performance mode, basic, product, interior, jewelry, or custom. For whatever reason, my custom is not loading anything here. And then there's also some stuff down there. Depending on what settings you want on this, this is where you can customize the features, okay? So one of the things that you're probably going to notice, I'm just going to pull this off and close that one. There we go. Nope. That docking thing just drives me crazy. Just float. That's all I want you to do. Just stay there. Okay. So as the blades are spinning here, like right now the blades are spinning, but it doesn't look like the blades are spinning, which obviously it should. So under lighting, I can go to, under render, I can go to motion blur. That'll turn that on. And now we'll see the blades are actually like motion blurred, which makes it look like they're actually spinning. Then under lighting, we have some other features. So basic is just basic, just like, you know, make it look good enough. Product will enhance some other features of it, like global illumination and like ground illumination, okay? So by changing these up here, it changes these down there, all right? So if I go back to basic, you'll see that self-shadow is still on, but the other ones are off. So you can either just turn these on or pick from the above list. This is an interior, so that's a new feature, so I will click that just to see if that looks any different. I think I'm getting a little bit more oranginess or yellowness there. I do want global illumination. I do want ground illumination. Caustics I don't need. If you're unfamiliar with what caustics are, basically if you shine a light through something reflective or through something on something reflective or through like a glass, the dispersion of light from the reflection or the glass, that's what caustics are. The bottom of a pool in the summer, you have the sun's rays hitting it, that's caustics. This is caustics, that's caustics. I have no caustic effects on this one specifically. This is reflective. I would probably have something there, but it's not worth the extra stuff. Every feature you add will add more render time to your rendering, so I would say ignore caustics, but throw the rest of them on. So that looks like a pretty decent rendering of this, and it looks like it's pretty well into the scene, like it feels like it's kind of in the scene. So I'm happy with the way that's turning out. Now I can go to render, and then I would hit this render button, click, and then it would go through and it would render out my stuff, okay? I'm not going to render it out here because I want to show you the next step of that too, but that's what you would do. You would render it out and you would get an animation. Just like our previous animations, you would then bring that in After Effects and make that into a QuickTime movie, right? I don't need to go over that process because After Effects probably won't open anyway, but that's what you do. The second part of this I want is a still image, okay? So still images we've dealt with before too. Correct. I want two things, animation and still. And you'll notice we're not filling out the sheets. By the time you're done with this, you should know what stuff needs to be filled out on that sheet, right? So we're going to do a still image, and this is going to be an environment. I'm going to save this. And you should save it as two things. One, my animation. Another one as my still image. That way you have both files that you can jump back and forth to if you need to. Correct. Yep. And then when you turn this in, I just want your textures, your scene, and your still in your movie. I don't need your keyshot file. I don't need your rendered images. You can see already my hard drive space is getting depleted. This semester is eating it up a lot, so I don't need anything extra. I deleted from my modeling class, we have these files are called substance files. Basically, instead of drawing a Photoshop texture and then bringing it in, we do the textures right on the model themselves, but those textures are huge, they're like a gig. I wiped that out last night on my computer, and that saved me 60 gigs on one of my drives. Just those from one class. All right, so for the still image, we're going to go to a studio environment, and we're going to pick something that is going to make our model shine. This is going to be what's called the money shot, where you get close to the item, you can see your labels, you can see some good details on it. We don't have to worry about the animation. We do want to see the propeller spinning, but we're not worried about the animation. So the only way to do that is to see what looks good is to just drop something on and then see what's going to work. So I'm going to get a bit closer, like so. I can close my timeline. I don't need this up right now. There we go. All right, so this environment I don't like. Okay, for my model it doesn't work. Let me try this overhead array. That looks pretty decent. I like the way the lighting looks on this one. I may want to, as I'm previewing this, turn off motion blur. And I may want to also, as I'm previewing this, set this back to basic. Okay, just so I can look at the lighting and look at how the overall scene is looking. This is your startup one, which is that. So maybe I want to, again, try stuff and see what's going to look good. I actually like this blurrier one. Okay. These ones here that have the sharp reflections in the background, you'll see that those sharp reflections are picking up on these blades, where the fuzzier ones kind of disperse the reflections a bit more, okay?
It has a lot more gradient to the highlights and the shadows versus when you've got the hard light on it.
Right, and there's some things, if you look at cars, you'll see, sometimes you do see like those studio lights in the reflections because they want you to see the lines of the car. For this, I don't want you to see the lines. I like the way that looks there. That one too, like maybe that could look cool. I don't really care for it. Let's say that, basic 4K. Okay, so go through and just play with the different setups until you find one that you like. Now you may find I like the lighting on one, but I don't like the background. Like that's a possibility, right? Like so for this one, I actually like the way it's lighting it because I'm getting these sharp highlights going around here and around there. But I don't like the way the background looks. I think it looks like too much, like it's distracting. Over here under the environment, I can turn off the background. So if I go to background here, right now it's set up to lighting environment, which is this. This is new too. Holy cow, that's awesome. So before you could not do this, it looks like you can grab these little nodes and actually adjust the lighting as on the fly. Like I can just pull this up and get more lighting at the top and pull this down and get less lighting. Like that is like crazy awesome. Or grab this one and tweak that. Oh, that's cool. All right, they've really come a long way in this program. Cool. You could even go to the editor and then play with stuff here too, it looks like as well. Anyway, so you can go to, instead of having the lighting environment, you can just say a color, and now you'll just have basically a color back there, or you can say a backplate image, and you could load in a backplate image, which we don't have any backplate images loaded, okay? So if I load in a color, the lighting on this is exactly the same, but now I just have white back there. So remember when we did our title sequences, that's basically what we had, is we had that backplate, and then we had our rendering right on top of it. That's what we're getting here, okay? I could also go down to the ground area, and let's see, occlusion for ground. Oh, look at that. That looks kind of neat, right? This is, again, one of the sucky things about some of these features is that it does allow us to add stuff to it. So like I could add this occlusion ground shadows, but I can't adjust those occlusion ground shadows. I like the fact that it has that. I want to soften it. I can't do that, okay? So the VRED allows you to adjust more stuff. Ground reflections too, so now I can see some of the reflection down here in the ground. I could also say flatten the ground, which in this case isn't really doing anything. I'm going to get rid of that and get rid of the ground reflection. I think I'm just going to leave it just like that. I don't want it to be too flat because now I can't see the propellers too good. I want to be at somewhat of an angle. Maybe like that. I can also go to my camera and I can adjust my perspective down here. So instead of this being a 35 millimeter, smaller numbers will give you more of like the, if you guys remember, if you guys ever seen a rap video where it's like really extreme stuff, right? That's what it would be. So if I set this to like 5, you'll see that I get this like huge distortion, right? So as it's closer to the camera, it does that.
So it's the same thing as when they're talking about cameras and you're looking at the aperture on it. The larger the number,
Well, that would be the focal length, yeah. So the zoomed in or zoomed out, yep. So 50 is typically like the human eye. 120 is like zoomed in from really far away. You'll see the bigger number you go, the more it's going to flatten out your model. The smaller number, the more it's going to give it a look of perspective, okay? So if I wanted to look small, I would go with a bigger number. If I wanted to look big, I would go with a smaller number. So if I went with like, let's say 15, that's too much. If I went to 20, that feels like it has a bit more perspective than the other one did, okay? So I'm going to try to find a cool angle. That looks like a cool angle here. I'm going to turn on my motion blur. I'm going to turn on my global illumination and my ground illumination and my interior mode. And I'm also going to go to my image, and just like our previous images where we would set up our sizing here, I'm going to unlock this and set this to 3000 by 2400. Now, if they fixed it, this won't be a problem. We'll see. Nope, they didn't fix that part. Okay. So I set this to 980, or I set it to 3000, and it just stops. This is basically a proportion, is what I'm looking at. So if I look at 3000 by 2400, I don't know why I brought calculator open. Anyway, hold on, Matt. I'm going to set this to 300 by 240. Drop a 0, right. Because all we're looking at is proportions, so I can see that it's going to fit within that box. So I'm going to go, let's say, to like that. And I could maybe even double this. So let's say 600 by 480.
will it mess with the resolution or
Nope, because it's still the same proportions, okay? As long as it's still an 8 by 10, that's what we're after.
and it'll still be at like 300 pixels per inch, right?
Well, yeah, yep, it'll still be that. You could also add effects to this. So if I wanted to add some blooms to this, you can kind of see the blooms that are happening on top of that. I could also add some vignetting here. That's too much vignetting. Yeah, I actually don't think I'll add any of these in there. I don't like any of those. Yeah, so that's sufficient. Okay, so now I would go back to my render. I would go to my output. I would not do a animation here.
Back to where it was before distortion.
Yep. So this is my Sarcona drone rendering. This goes into my P drive folder. Renders. Yep. And then 3000 by 2400. And you'll see automatically it goes to an 8 by 10 at 300 DPI. Okay. And then again, I could set up my render passes. I don't need to worry about the render passes in this case. I would still save this as a TIFF. And then I would hit the render button, and it would go through and render out that still image and save it to that spot, okay? So the animation, you can kind of figure if you watch one frame get done, how long does that one frame take? That's probably how long it's going to take for all the frames to take times 120. So if one frame takes a minute, 120 frames will take 120 minutes, right? For that 8 by 10, it might take an hour for that one frame to get done, okay? So just kind of figure that when you're rendering your stuff out. If you do render, obviously get the render signs, throw it on your computer, and that's it, okay? Make a movie of your other one. Make sure your stuff obviously looks good. so you can still see it. If you see anything glaringly wrong, obviously fix it. You could do post stuff too if you wanted to add a vignette in post to this. If you wanted to tweak the colors in post, you can do that as well. Not required, but definitely always try to make this look as best as you can. Regardless of what the assignment is for your portfolio, for getting a job, you want these things to look awesome. And that's it. Questions on the drone yet? No? Okay. So that's going to be